All moralists might perhaps agree that a good government is one that secures the good of the governed. And if we agree that in a particular case a government is charged with the care not of a country or a state, but of a people, we may say confidently that the moral function of that government is to secure the true good of that people. Success in exercising this moral function will then depend on two things: whether the government sees or intrinsically pursues what is truly the good of the people, and whether it is intelligent and courageous enough to secure, in the circumstances of the time, as much of that good as possible. I say advisedly the true good of the people, because I am considering a moral question of ultimate aims, not the means of satisfying some accidental passion, such as ambition to become and to remain the government in power. Now, the criterion by which to judge what is the true good of a people or of an individual lies within that individual or that people. If it were sought outside in the will of the monarch, or of God, or of the universe as a whole, or in the conscience of some foreign people or individual, the power exercised by that government would be an instance of militant domination. It must be therefore in the will of the people, not of the government, that the criterion must be found for determining the true good of that people. Here I must hasten to remind the reader that by will, written with a capital, I do not mean incidental wishes surging in a man or in society, and expressed in eloquence, in party policies, and in popular elections. There is a great difference, as Plato shows in the Gorgias, between doing as you like and getting what you want, and there is a greater difference still between getting what you wanted and finding what you needed. Now, by the will that determines the good proper to any creature, I understand the demands and potentialities of his nature, not of his consciousness. Plastic as his nature may be, it is always pregnant with capacities and secret needs which have not come to the surface, although they may betray their presence by his superficial incoherence and irritation, and beneath these by his profound dissatisfaction. Will, then, with a capital letter, here serves as a name for fundamental needs and capacities, not for casual desires or conventional judgments. Now, we may see in the newborn child, as soon as the rhythm of his organism becomes normal, that the first and perpetual need of the primal will is food. Therefore, the first duty of good government is to see that the people have enough to eat. As food, however, is something that man, like other animals, has always known how to find for himself, else he would have perished, governments are apt to overlook this requirement, and rather to levy a good percentage of the food that the land produces. Seeing that rulers in their parks and palaces, with the mercenaries that defend them there, have no time, except occasionally in the chase, to procure food for themselves. And evidently, it will not be their fault, but that of the weather or of the farmers, shepherds, and herdsmen, if there is not enough to go round. That there should not always be enough to go round, even before there were governments or mercenaries to levy any taxes, follows in fact from the nature of things, and is hardly anybody's fault. Besides occasional bad seasons, a cause for periodic scarcity lies in a second fundamental demand in the animal will that must be satisfied on pain of extinction. And this is the universal, unavoidable, and immoderate impulse to reproduce the species. Only the dangers and hardships of life keep all kinds of living creatures from multiplying prodigiously, and if the oppression and waste of governments do not contribute to keep population down, half-starved hordes would still be driving one another all over the earth, into the sea or the desert. The second duty of a good government, to regulate population, so that it may not outrun the means of subsistence, has been as little recognized by most governments as the first duty to forestall famine, and yet, indirectly, without knowing it, civilization has, in many ways, reduced the birth rate and generally so lowered the vitality and thrift of the old primitive society as to leave fertile regions sometimes almost waste and ready to receive new barbarous people. Here we come upon the function that governments most readily exercise and make the basis of their permanent domination, the function of defense. Any settled population, if unprotected, is exposed to invasion. If prosperous, its lands and possessions tempt ruder neighbors. If poor and sparse, richer neighbors will insensibly oust it or reduce its remnants to subjection. In either case, the conqueror will become a government and pose as protector of the conquered. A home government, even if originally founded on conquest or revolution, might have proved, or at least seemed, a lighter burden. The need of defense will then justify any actual government and make it seem, in so far, to operate in the interests of the people. The people, however, will soon have occasion to ask, who shall defend us against our defenders? And it will probably find in its own customs, or in those of its masters, a tribunal to which it can appeal, because the office of judge is paternal and was sanctioned religiously long before there were political governments. The abuses of one agent of government may thus be controlled by appealing to another agent, morally independent and prior, although perhaps later absorbed and corrupted by the political authorities. Unfortunately, the greatest abuse of governments, by which they act most radically against the good of the people, is one which no judiciary can control, even if its own authority be traditionally higher than that of the actual power. Defense, the palmary use of government, requires an instrument able to cope with the aggressor. It requires a police and an army, and who, in the end, can compose these forces except the sons of the people? The greatest tax levied by government will therefore be a blood tax. It will sacrifice the cream of the people to defend its skimmed milk. Moreover, this defense will often be preventative defense, that is to say, timely aggression. And timely aggression will not always prevent an attack on the people's interests. When most successful, it may rather enlarge the scope of the government by new conquests and alliances, leaving the people who help to obtain these advantages for its rulers neglected and absorbed into a large state where their traditions are despised and their freedom lost. A final and comprehensive public good, which it is a function of government to facilitate, is prosperity. I say to facilitate, not to procure, because economic arts and the wealth they produce are proper to individuals, to families, and to other private societies. And in a simple phase, they can develop beautifully without the aid or the existence of political government. But the military and the provident functions of government depend on the prosperity of the people for their success. Roads and bridges, for instance, are crucial in war, as are stores of provisions, and it is evident that the richer the people, the more the government can reasonably draw from them for its undertakings. And although arts arise and develop best under free competition, competition may become wasteful and end in monopoly. And when a monopoly is important, it can hardly remain justly in private hands. The government, therefore, has to take it over. But I think there is a natural limit to the advantage that government direction can confer upon industry or upon education, which is another function that it now often assumes. The limit coincides with the distinction between economic and liberal arts. I have just indicated how economic arts may require political control in advanced states of civilization, although their vitality and progress always remain dependent on private zeal and inspiration. Imagination is something personal, and labor becomes a burden when it does not excite the imagination. Education, for instance, may be regarded as a means to economic work. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are necessary for tradesmen, but when they are taught and learned only for that purpose, they are diverted from their natural use, which is to merge into liberal arts and be intrinsically liberal, since they employ and liberate the spirit. They should be taught even in their elements, as arts, as games, as occasions for delight, and then their utility in the business world will not prevent them from remaining essentially liberal, even if not pursued beyond their material occasions. They will retain an intellectual vitality and be play for the mind while they serve the world. Or consider the case of religion. Governments, especially when the people have a single traditional religion, do well to respect that religion, knit as it is into the moral and imaginative texture of their nation. But they must never touch or reform religion for its own sake. Individually, and even ceremonially, all the members of a government may bow to that religion, but they should never base their policy on religious motives. Church, on the other hand, should be considered by them and their government only as factors in politics. To act as missionaries would be an impertinence to the public and probably a heresy in the church itself, while to persecute or disestablish or denounce that religion in their capacity as statesmen would be to stimulate sedition and destroy culture. Things of the spirit are not their business, but it is their business, as guardians of the people's interests, to keep the doors open to vital liberty for all men in the spirit, and to preserve the works of spirit in the past as their greatest treasure.
Заплатить за это дело. Иди ко мне. Держи, смотри. Том, держи. Я тебе время буду платить. Давай, возьми. Том, Том, давай, вставай, оп. Сделай, покажи. Том. 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 Давай, молодец, давай, давай, вставай, оп. Покажи. Встань, о, Том. Давай, покажи мастер-класс. Давай, Том. Том, давай. Покажи. Том, давай. Том. Том, давай. Том, сделай это, Том. Том, давай. Давай, молодец, давай. Ай, браво, молодец, давай. Ты молодец, сам поднял, закрутил. Вот он, артист. Ты молодец. На, держи, Том. Держи, я тебе заплачу. Ты молодец мой. Все, иди гуляй.